Lowell, be honest with yourself. I was bored. I didn't even love you. You were just easy. That was the last thing she ever texted me. It was 1:17 a.m. I remember because I took a screenshot, proof that the woman I gave 9 years of my life to, the woman I thought I'd grow old beside, managed to condense my entire existence into 4 insults and a send button. She didn't block me. She didn't need to. Her silence did all the work. She vanished like a fever dream, no apology, no closure, no forwarding address. I remember sitting in the bathtub fully clothed that night, holding my phone like it was a grenade I was too scared to let go of. 3 weeks later, I came across her online, new photos, new city, new boyfriend. His teeth were too perfect. His captions read like recycled Pinterest quotes. One of them said, "Find someone who makes you forget what pain feels like." And there she was, clinging to him like I'd never existed. No trace of the man who used to carry her home drunk, who built her shelves, who sat through her silent phases and still brought her orange juice when she was sick. I didn't comment. I didn't call. But I started writing emails. Not to her, to myself. Drafts I never intended to send. Things I wish I'd screamed when she walked out. Things I never had the nerve to say. I called the folder "If I Ever Matter Again." And then I forgot about it. Life didn't move on, not really. It limped. My apartment echoed when I breathed too loudly. I kept the TV on at night just to pretend someone was talking. I grew to hate silence because it sounded like her absence. I even avoided grocery stores on Saturdays because that's when we used to go together. But last Tuesday, I opened my front door and found an envelope. No name. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. It was us. From a trip we took 6 years ago. I was sunburned. She was laughing. There was a heart drawn on the back in blue ink. That same night, she texted me after 378 days of nothing. "I've been thinking. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know which version of her I'd be talking to. The woman who said I was her forever. Or the one who told me I was forgettable. The message sat unopened for 3 days. I read the preview over and over again. "I've been thinking. Can we talk?" Without ever tapping it. I didn't want the red status to give her power. I didn't want to admit that the sight of her name on my screen still lit something in me, even if it was just anger wrapped in confusion. You'd think after a year of silence I'd have built some sort of immunity. But no. I was still the guy who stared at her empty closet for 6 weeks before finally tossing her last left-behind sock in the trash. I was still the guy who didn't cancel her name on the lease until my landlord asked me, awkwardly, if she was okay. The day after I got her text, I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked to the edge of town where the train tracks curve into the hills. That's where we used to go when we fought, back when fights were about who forgot to do the dishes, not who forgot to love. I stood there for maybe an hour, trying to picture what I'd say if I saw her again. But nothing came. I didn't want to imagine her face. I didn't want to remember the way she blinked slowly when she was lying. I didn't want to hear that breathy voice that once told me I made her feel safe. I wanted to erase her, but my memory had better handwriting than I did. The 4th night after her message, I finally gave in. I didn't reply, I just opened it. And it was longer than I expected. I know I don't deserve a response, but I've been carrying so much guilt. I thought I needed to find myself, and maybe I did, but everything I found led back to you. I miss you, Lowell. I miss the way you used to make tea before bed. I miss your silence, how comforting it used to be. I know I said things that can't be unsaid, but I wanted you to know you weren't forgettable. Not even close. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stared at the screen until it dimmed on its own. My reflection in the glass looked like a man still trapped in the same moment she left me. And then, as if her timing hadn't already twisted the knife deep enough, she added, "I'm coming back to town next week. If you'd be willing to meet. I'll be at Ethel's on Thursday at 6. If you don't come, I'll understand." Ethel's. That stupid diner with the floral wallpaper and cracked red booths. The place where we celebrated our 2nd anniversary with pancakes and cheap coffee, because our car broke down and we had to cancel the trip. The place where she told me she wanted to grow old with me. And now she was trying to turn it into a reunion venue? I didn't respond. But Thursday came anyway. At 5:48 p.m., I was standing in front of the mirror, holding a shirt I hadn't worn since our last dinner together. Navy, slightly wrinkled, still smelling faintly of the cologne she once said made me smell like nostalgia and honesty. I should have thrown it out. I didn't. By 6:03, I was parked outside Ethel's. I could see her through the window, hair shorter, back straighter, a book in her hand she wasn't really reading. She kept glancing toward the door, waiting, expecting, and I sat there, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. This wasn't a movie. There was no background music, no poetic closure, just me, her, and the space between who we were and what we'd become. At 6:17, I did something I hadn't planned. I got out of the car, but not to go in. I walked across the street, stood where she couldn't see me, and pulled out my phone. I opened the email folder I'd once named, If I Ever Matter Again. Then I opened a blank one, and I started typing, You left me with silence, so now I'm giving it back. I stayed across the street for 38 minutes, not because I was indecisive, but because I wanted to see what she'd do if I didn't show. It wasn't revenge. I don't have the spine for that. It was curiosity, maybe, or closure, or just one final glimpse of the woman who'd unraveled me, now sitting in the very booth where she once said, Even if we're broke and old and boring, I want to be with you. I watched her stir her coffee in slow circles, checking her phone between sips. She didn't smile once. She didn't even touch the pie she ordered. I guess she thought she was being poetic, strawberry pie for a sweet new beginning, or whatever story she probably rehearsed in her head. But she was alone, and with each passing minute, the confidence in her posture deflated just a little more. At 6:42, she typed something furiously on her phone and then paused. She didn't send it, just stared at the screen like it was mocking her. And then, slowly, she reached for the check, paid in cash, and left without looking back. That should have been it. The end. Me reclaiming a shred of dignity and disappearing from her story the way she disappeared from mine. But that night, around 11:20 p.m., I got another text. I guess I deserved that. No punctuation, no anger, just 6 words and a cliff where I expected a paragraph. I didn't respond. Not right away. I walked into the kitchen and stood in front of the sink, gripping the edges like I was trying to keep the world from spinning. My reflection in the window stared back at me like a stranger who couldn't decide if he was proud or broken. Maybe both. I opened the fridge and realized I hadn't bought real groceries in weeks. Just frozen pizza, bottled water, and a half-full tub of peanut butter. It hit me then. I hadn't lived since she left. I just waited. And now that she wanted back in, I had no idea what I was protecting anymore. My heart? My pride? A version of me that no longer existed? The next morning, I finally responded. No, you didn't deserve silence. But I didn't deserve to be erased either. She read it within seconds. Typing bubbles danced, disappeared, reappeared. Then, I didn't know how to fix what I broke. I still don't. But I can't stop thinking about the way you looked at me, like I mattered even when I didn't know who I was. I stared at that message so long, my phone went dark twice. And still, a part of me, the tired, lonely, stupid part, wondered what it would feel like to forgive her. Not because she earned it, but because maybe, just maybe, I still wanted to believe we were worth something. That the man I used to be, the man who brought her sunflowers when she failed her driver's test, who sat through her cousin's 3-hour interpretive dance recital just to hold her hand, still existed beneath all this silence. She suggested we meet again. Neutral place, she said. No pressure. She offered the park by the lake. The one with the creaky swings and the bench with our initials carved into it. Sunday, noon. No diner. No coffee. No expectations. Just 2 ghosts meeting in daylight to see if they still recognize each other. And this time I said yes. I wish I hadn't. Sunday arrived like it had something to prove. The sky was overcast, not gloomy, just muted. Like it was waiting to see how this would end before deciding whether to rain or not. I didn't dress for the occasion. Just wore the same hoodie I always did on my worst days, the one with the tear in the sleeve that I never bothered fixing. That seemed appropriate. Why try to look whole when I still wasn't? I got there before noon. Sat on the bench we carved our initials into during the summer of our 3rd year. Me with a pocket knife I wasn't supposed to have. Her with her laughter echoing louder than the wind. The carving was still there. Faded. Cracked. But there. Just like us. She showed up 7 minutes late. Not that I was counting. Nora walked slower than usual. Not in a lazy way, but in that hesitant, tight-shouldered kind of walk, like she didn't want the ground to feel her weight. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup, no jewelry, just a plain gray sweater and jeans. The kind she used to wear when she wasn't trying to impress anyone. We didn't hug. She sat beside me, but not close. Maybe 3 inches of space between us, but it may as well have been 3 continents. Neither of us spoke for a while. The only sound was the creak of the rusty swing nearby, pushed by a breeze that didn't know how to stop. Finally, she broke the silence. I thought if I stayed away long enough, the guilt would go away. I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice to come out steady, and I wasn't sure what I'd say, even if it did. She kept going softly. It didn't. Not when I left. Not with him. Not even when I moved across the country. I kept thinking about your quiet. Your hands. The way you used to leave notes in my coat pockets. My jaw tightened. She had no idea I still kept those old notes in a shoebox under the bed. She probably thought I tossed them the moment she walked out. I should have. I made you small, she said next. I made you feel like the background character in your own life. That line. It cracked something in me, because that's exactly what I had become. I didn't even have the words to describe it back then, but hearing her say it out loud made me feel exposed and validated and ashamed all at once. She turned to me. I didn't come to ask you to forgive me. I came to admit that you were right. I looked at her, finally, and asked the only thing I'd been afraid to say for months. Right about what? She blinked, swallowed. That love isn't just about staying. It's about staying when it's hard. And I didn't. You were boring, Lowell. You were gentle and kind and dependable. And I let some shiny distraction convince me that was a flaw. I let someone who didn't even know my middle name tell me you were replaceable. The world spun a little slower right then. I didn't say anything. I just studied her face. It looked older, not from age, but from the weight she carried. Her eyes weren't the same ones that had once looked at me like I was her entire world. Now they just looked sorry. I was pregnant, she whispered. My breath stopped. Back in January. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure it was yours. And before I could find out, I lost it. She wiped at her cheek, even though no tears had fallen. I told him. He told me I was drama, that I was trying to trap him. That's when I realized I wasn't running toward something better. I was just running away from something real. I stared ahead at the lake. The ducks swam in aimless circles. I tried to breathe normally, but my chest felt like someone had crumpled it in their fist. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said again. I just needed you to know what happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why she didn't come back when it still could have mattered. Why she let me rot in silence. Why she let guilt catch up to her only when it had nowhere else to go. But instead I just said, I can't go back there, Nora. I don't even know where there is anymore. She nodded, slowly. I understand. And then, almost gently, she stood up and walked away. No drama, no begging, no tears. Just the sound of footsteps on gravel and the silence of a man who didn't realize until that moment that the version of love he was still holding on to had already died. After she left the park, I didn't move for a long time. The bench felt colder than when I arrived. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was because the weight I'd been carrying for a year had shifted. Not gone, just no longer mine alone. She had taken a piece of it with her in her silence, and now she'd returned with it, heavier and cracked in places I didn't even remember placing pressure. I stayed until the sun dipped behind the trees. Not because I wanted to be poetic, but because I couldn't figure out what came next. There was no afterplan. No script for what you do when the woman who left you with nothing comes back, not to rebuild, but to confess. She wasn't asking to be forgiven. She wasn't even asking to be remembered. She just wanted me to know she suffered too. That the explosion that tore through my life left shrapnel in hers even if I couldn't see it. I walked home, and for the first time in months, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like punishment. It just felt quiet. I poured a drink, bourbon, the one she hated the smell of, and I sat in my armchair, the one she said made the living room look like a waiting room. I sipped slowly and stared at the spot on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. The nail was still there. I never took it out. Maybe I thought if I left it long enough, the picture would come back on its own. That night, I opened the closet. Not mine. Hers. I hadn't touched it in over a year. I told everyone I had gotten rid of her stuff, but that was only partly true. I'd cleared the shelves, tossed out the shampoo bottles and crumpled notes and tangled earrings, but there was one box I couldn't get myself to throw away. It sat on the top shelf, hidden behind a stack of old bedsheets and a broken vacuum. Inside were small things insignificant to anyone else. A movie stub from the first film we saw together. A lighter she used even though she never smoked. A napkin with her doodles from that night we got stranded in a thunderstorm at the gas station diner. And tucked beneath it all, a folded piece of notebook paper. Her handwriting. I unfolded it carefully like it might fall apart if I breathed too hard. Lowell, if I'm ever gone, not just physically but really gone, please know that it wasn't because you weren't enough. You were always more than I deserved. I just never knew how to hold still when things got too quiet. I hadn't read that note in 11 months. She left it in the kitchen drawer the night she walked out, and I didn't find it until a week later when I was looking for a wine opener I never used. Reading it now, it felt like a time capsule from a woman who had already disappeared before she even left. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened. That's the thing about heartbreak, it doesn't always make a scene. Sometimes it just clocked in at 7 a.m., wiped down floors and nodded politely to strangers. But something did change. On my lunch break, I found myself pulling out my phone and opening my notes app. I started typing, really typing, for the first time since she left. Not to her. Not about her. Just thoughts. Fragments. Feelings that had no shape or destination. And in the middle of it all, my phone buzzed. A message from Nora. I left something at your place. I don't want to invade your space, but could I come by sometime this week to get it? I stared at that message, feeling something dark and familiar crawl up the back of my throat. She left so much behind. Not just things, but weight. Dust. Shadows that never moved even when the light changed. I wanted to reply right away. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say you left everything that mattered and now you want a souvenir back? But instead, I took a deep breath, closed the app, and slid the phone into my pocket. She wanted something she forgot. She had no idea what she actually left behind. And I was starting to think, maybe neither did I. I didn't answer her message right away. I thought I would. I even opened the thread and typed out a few responses. What is it? When? Just take it, but I deleted them each time. Because the truth is, I wasn't sure I wanted her inside these walls again. Not physically. Not emotionally. She already haunted every inch of the place as it was. Letting her in again felt like unlocking the front door just so the storm could finish what it started. But curiosity has a cruel way of dressing itself up as control. So, the next night I went hunting. I figured I'd try to guess what she meant. I checked the bathroom, the closet, under the bed. Nothing stood out. I opened the junk drawer, flipped through old receipts, even dug through the box in the coat closet where we used to keep spare keys and broken phone chargers. That's when I found it. A flat envelope, unmarked, taped to the underside of the old photo album box. I knew right away I didn't put it there. Nora was the only one who ever used that tape, the cheap kind that peeled like old sunburn. I peeled it off carefully. The envelope was thick. Inside, a flash drive. No note. No label. Just a cold piece of plastic that rattled softly when shaken. I stared at it for a long time. Every possible explanation ran through my head: pictures, documents, maybe old poems or letters she never sent. Or worse, something she meant for someone else but left behind without realizing it. I plugged it into my laptop and watched the screen flicker. There were 6 video files. Each one labeled only with a date. None of them recent. I hesitated. Then I clicked on the oldest one. The video opened with Nora's face, younger, softer, wearing a sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years. She was sitting cross-legged on the edge of her bed, holding her phone like she was recording something not meant to be shared. Entry 1, she whispered. March 12th. I don't know why I'm doing this. Maybe I just need to hear myself say it. But today, I looked at Lowell and realized I don't know if I'm still in love with him. The screen froze in my mind even as the video kept playing. I hit pause. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to keep watching. I didn't want to hear the timeline of my own slow erasure. But something in me needed to know how long she'd been gone before she actually walked out. I clicked on the second video. Entry 2. May 1st. He made me pancakes this morning. He didn't even notice that I'd been crying in the shower. I think he thinks I'm tired. I think he wants to fix it, but he doesn't know what's broken. And I don't have the heart to tell him it's us. Each video was like peeling off another layer of something I hadn't known was infected. She never said my name with anger, just disappointment. She was unraveling quietly right beside me and I never saw it. The The fourth video hit differently. Entry 4. July 19th. I kissed someone else today. I don't even know if it counts. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like remembering what it was like to be seen. I came home and Lowell had fallen asleep on the couch. He looked so peaceful. I wanted to love him again. But I think I left already. I closed the laptop. I couldn't breathe. My hands clenched so tightly the knuckles went white. I stood up, paced the room, ran cold water over my face. But nothing cleared it. Not the air. Not the silence. Not the voice in my head screaming, "You asked for the truth, this is it." And the worst part? A small, masochistic part of me understood her. That scared me more than anything. The next morning, I texted her back. "I found the envelope. You left it behind. Maybe you meant to. Either way, it's here." She responded within 5 minutes. "I didn't think you'd ever see those. I'm sorry. I really am. I was going to delete them, but I couldn't. They were the only place I was being honest." I asked her the question I didn't want the answer to. Was there more than just that one kiss? There was no reply for over an hour. Then came a single word. Yes. And that was the moment something in me finally snapped, not with anger. Not with hatred. With finality. I didn't respond. I didn't rage. I just opened my laptop again, renamed the flash drive folder closure, and moved it to an external drive I'd never plug in again. I had seen what I needed. Now the only question left was, would I let her walk back in, now that I finally knew where she'd been? The following week passed in a haze, like someone had dimmed the lights on my life. I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't exactly awake either. It's a strange thing, learning the truth you thought you wanted and realizing it doesn't hurt the way you imagined. It's quieter. Duller. Like a song you used to love that suddenly sounds wrong. You don't hate it, you just don't trust it anymore. I didn't text Nora again. She didn't either. Maybe we were both pretending the conversation was over when in fact, something enormous was still unsaid. But the silence was a relief. It was the first time since she reappeared that I didn't feel like I had to be ready for the next hit. Until Saturday. Around 6 p.m., I heard the knock. Not a buzz. Not a text. A knock. Soft. Measured. As if she already knew whether or not I'd answer but needed to do it anyway. I froze in the hallway. Part of me hoped it was just a neighbor, maybe the kid from 4B who always left his keys in his locker. But deep down I knew. I opened the door. There she was. Nora stood there holding something in her arms, small, worn, wrapped in one of her old scarves. Her hair was up. She wore no makeup. Her eyes looked swollen, like she'd been crying. But there was no trace of manipulation in her expression. No theatrics. Just raw, fragile stillness. "I left this," she said. "I know you said you found the envelope, but I meant to get this too." She handed it to me. It was the music box. The one we bought in Asheville during our anniversary trip. It played a soft tune when wound up, something orchestral, but I never knew the name. She used to keep jewelry inside it. One time she put a note in there that said, "I still get nervous around you." In the good way. Now it felt like she was handing me a relic from a religion neither of us believed in anymore. I took it. Held it gently. She didn't ask to come in. I didn't offer. But I did say, "You want coffee?" Why did I say that? I didn't want to talk. I didn't want her here. I didn't want to pretend we could have a conversation without stepping over the grave of what we used to be. But she nodded. Yeah, that'd be nice. So we sat. At the kitchen table. Same place we used to play cards. Same place we argued over whether or not to adopt a dog. Same place she told me she hated her job and I told her we'd figure it out. She held the coffee like it was anchoring her. Neither of us sipped. "I never told anyone about those videos," she finally said. "Not even him. I made them because I was afraid of what I'd become if I didn't let the thoughts out somewhere. I wasn't fair to you, Lowell. I know that. But I was also drowning in a version of myself that didn't know how to love without escaping first." I stared into my cup unmoved. My fingers tightened around the handle. "I cheated," she added, as if I hadn't already figured it out. "More than once. But it was never about sex. It was about erasing you so I wouldn't feel bad for leaving you." That hit harder than anything she said before. Because it made sense. It was too honest to be dramatic. She needed to destroy the idea of me so she could justify walking away from it. "I became the villain on purpose," she whispered. "Because if I turned you into the reason I was unhappy, then I wouldn't have to face that I was the one who couldn't sit still with good things." I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me this now? After a year of silence? After you dropped a bomb and walked off like it was someone else's house?" She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "Because I finally became the person who could sit still. And I hated that you weren't there to see it. That broke something in me I didn't know was still unbroken. She had done the healing, the growing, the reflecting without me. And now she wanted to bring the results back like some trophy to present. I don't want to start over, I said. And I don't want to go backward. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. I know. I don't even know what I want, I admitted. But I know it's not this. She stood, picked up the scarf, walked toward the door. I just wanted you to know you were always worth staying for. I just didn't know how to stay. She paused before opening the door. And I never stopped loving you. Even when I was pretending I had. The door closed softly behind her. I stood there for a long time, just listening. But there was nothing to hear. No footsteps. No crying. Just silence. And then I walked back into the kitchen, picked up the music box, and wound it once. It played the tune, but it didn't sound like it used to. The morning after Nora left, the apartment felt different. Not heavier, not emptier. Just settled. Like the final piece of a difficult puzzle had clicked into place, not because it fixed everything, but because it revealed the full picture. And now I could finally step back and see what I had been trying to piece together blindly for the past year. I didn't text her. I didn't block her either. I just let her final words settle in my mind like dust falling slowly to the floor. I never stopped loving you, even when I was pretending I had. For the first time in months, I went outside without a destination. I walked through the neighborhood, nodded at strangers, even stopped to pet the dog from the corner house that always barked at me. The wind felt less like a reminder of what I'd lost and more like a whisper that maybe, not today, but someday, something else was coming. I started journaling again. Not dramatic, page-long entries, but little things. Observations. A funny comment from a kid at work. The way the sun hit my window around 5:45. How it reminded me of the glow that used to linger on Nora's cheek after a late afternoon nap. I didn't write these things because I missed her. I wrote them because, for the first time, they didn't hurt. Weeks passed. Then a month. Nora didn't contact me again. And I didn't expect her to. Our chapter had closed. Not slammed shut in anger or torn out in grief. Just gently, quietly, with the understanding that not all endings need noise to be meaningful. But life didn't freeze. One Saturday, I went back to the bookstore downtown. The one I used to avoid because it was where Nora and I once argued over which edition of Wuthering Heights looked better. This time, I wandered through the aisles with no purpose, letting titles catch my eye like old friends. That's where I met her, Riley. She was standing in the poetry section, flipping through a book with a cracked spine and a smile that looked like it came easily. We talked, first about books, then about coffee, then about how neither of us knew how to pronounce half the names in Greek mythology. She didn't feel like a spark. She felt like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And for the first time since Nora, I didn't feel guilty for smiling. We didn't fall in love instantly. That's not how real things work. But we laughed. A lot. We walked through rainstorms. We made pancakes at midnight. She asked questions about my past, but never demanded more than I was ready to give. And slowly I started giving more. One night, months later, she saw the old music box sitting on my bookshelf. "You play this?" she asked, winding it gently. I shrugged. "Used to." She listened to the melody, tilting her head slightly. "It's pretty. Kind of sad, but pretty." And then, like it was nothing, she placed it back and said, "Sounds like someone who finally figured out how to end the song." That night, I tucked the music box away in a drawer. Not to hide it, just to make space. Space for something new. For the first time in a very, very long time, I wasn't looking back. I was finally walking forward.